Hello and welcome to Astral Observatory, the show where I talk about something Zelda related that's been on my mind, and this has been on my mind something fierce. Link's Awakening has been out for long enough for people to really sink their teeth into, and it's been met with overwhelming positivity, and deservedly so. It's an incredible remake. The game looks incredible, sounds even better, and the controls feel fantastic. Honestly, I could gush about it for an entire video, and maybe I will. But it isn't without its controversy. In this case, people are pretty upset about the framerate. More specifically, the framerate frequently dropping at seemingly random times. A lot of people are complaining about this, saying that this kind of thing isn't acceptable. Other people are complaining about the complaining, saying how are you gonna let the framerate ruin your experience, or it isn't even that big of a deal, framerate doesn't matter. I need to weigh in, I can't help it. I am going to make a positioned stance and say that yes, it absolutely matters that the framerate isn't good. It is a bad thing that devalues the game, and it isn't something that we can let Nintendo get away with. Don't worry, I'm going to defend my statement, and I'm going to come from 3 different angles: quality, competency, and accountability. I'm happy to debate the framerate with you in the comments or on Twitter, just please listen to all 3 of my points first. And my first point is quality. I'm about to commit a big video game taboo and talk about price. Look, Link's Awakening is not a long game. I think most people are clocking out at around 8 to 12 hours, depending on what side quests they've done, or if this is their first time playing. And Nintendo made the decision to make the game full price. Do you know what that means for me? As a Canadian, that means a brand new game, in this case Link's Awakening, cost me almost $90. $90 is a lot of money, especially for something that's only going to last you half a day. Art is always a tricky thing to price because art is subjective, and what might only be worth $5 to you may be worth full price to another person. But what I can say is something that costs $90 and only supplies half a day's content better be polished to a shine. Framerate dips are essentially unacceptable for a $90 9 to 12 hour long game. And what makes it worse is the fact that it could have been fixed with more time spent polishing, which leads me to my next point: competency. As we all know, Breath of the Wild also had some very real issues with framerate when it first came out. In areas like Rito Village and Korok Forest, even after being patched, it was an issue. But it was one most of us didn't complain about too much, myself included. So why am I now complaining about the framerate issues in Link's Awakening if I didn't mind it in Breath of the Wild? Well, it's because the issues are a result of 2 very different levels of competency. Breath of the Wild is a massive game that is arguably too much for the Switch to flawlessly handle. The framerate drop doesn't come from anyone dropping the ball, it's actually quite the opposite. Nintendo made a game so dense and complicated that the sweet little Switch has a hard time running it. Link's Awakening, however, is the complete opposite. Link's Awakening is not a demanding game. It looks phenomenal, but this is primarily due to a strong artistic style, as opposed to raw horsepower. Don't get me wrong, even close up the models look fantastic, but the game isn't running into any slowdowns due to being too big or complicated, with the possible exception of the swamp. Instead, the reason the game has lag issues is because of incompetent, preventable programming issues. Essentially, the framerate drops occur from a few different issues, including memory leaks and poorly implemented dynamic resolution. This is the reason that the game still stutters even when you're in pretty simple areas like the indoors. For an incredible breakdown on why the framerate drops happen, check out GameXplain's video. They explain it as well as could be expected. Seriously, give it a watch. And this is where the crux of my argument comes from, that the issues result from poor programming and not enough time in development. If it was a genuine problem with the Switch's horsepower, I wouldn't be nearly as bothered. But no matter how much I like the game, I'm not going to simply be okay with Grezzo being lazy and Nintendo not holding them to a higher standard. That isn't acceptable. And that brings me to my last and biggest concern: accountability. We've always held Nintendo up as the gold standard for video game doneness, as weird of a phrase as that is. In the sense that when you buy a Nintendo game, you know for sure it'll be a few things. It's going to be polished, it's going to be a full, complete game without AAA bullshit like DLC or Seasons Passes splitting anything up, and it's going to be at the very least decent for what it is. Nintendo takes a lot of pride in this reputation. So we should make them uphold that reputation. We shouldn't let them slip up. They've tried with things in the past like the atrocious amount and price of Fire Emblem DLC, but community outcry put them in their place, and now Nintendo DLC is some of the best value you can get for your money when it comes to downloadable content. We need to hold them accountable here too. We can't let Nintendo think that they can just release things in an unpolished state and then patch them up after release. If it were any other company, say EA or Ubisoft, we'd rightly be calling for their heads. So Nintendo doesn't get a free pass just because we love them. I don't think Nintendo will ever become awful to the point of EA or other similar companies, but with things like this framerate issue, the Joy-Con drift being so prevalent and allegedly prevalent even in the new Switches, Pokemon Sword and Shield shaping up to be pretty poorly polished, and other issues, I'm really starting to worry that Nintendo products aren't to be implicitly trusted to be of top quality the way they once were. Cracks are starting to show, and it's up to us to point them out to Nintendo, just like we did with the Fire Emblem DLC, and most recently, the Joy-Con drift issue. I want to say that I'm not mentioning any of this to be a hater or edgy or anything like that. I wish Link's Awakening was the perfect game. To me, it's already like 90% out of 100. It's just that 10% happens to be extra egregious for me. And I just feel like a lot of people are letting Nintendo off the hook because it's Nintendo, and they don't want to admit Nintendo does any wrong, which I don't think is healthy, even for the most devout Zelda fan. Anyways, I'm curious to see what you guys think about the framerate issue. Feel free to let me know in the comments. And if there's anything you would like to see talked about in Astral Observatory, let me know in the comments, or go over to Twitter and send me a message on Twitter. I'd be happy to consider whatever you have to say. Thanks for watching again, and as always, be safe out there. It's dangerous to go alone.